Joe Rogan created the biggest podcast to ever exist. On Christmas Eve 2009, Joe Rogan went live on Ustream with his co-host and co-creator Brian Redban, who was a self-taught video editor and an employee at a computer store in Ohio. Joe hired Redban to work for him full-time doing filming, editing, and producing. This would turn out to be a great decision. Joe had noticed that Redban did some good video work for fellow comedian Doug Stanhope, and asked him to come along to his stand-up tours to shoot him and his friends doing comedy. Redban then relocated to California from his home in Ohio to work with Rogan. This would also turn out great for his career. Redban noticed that increased interest in Rogan's content was not really being met by the occasional video release, and wanted to combine his interest in live streaming with Rogan's content. He then started live streaming on Justin TV, now known as Twitch TV, with Rogan from the green room at various comedy gigs. Redban had no experience with audio and taught himself promptly how to use a mixing board and microphone setups.
Are we recording? I think we're recording.
Yeah.
Oh, we should get snowflakes. We should have had snowflakes on.
Yeah, we need Snowflake. Can you do something?
Rogan would later suggest that the pair should start streaming directly from his home and interacting with fans through a chat room or Twitter. He also thought the audio from these live streams could be released as a downloadable podcast. He was influenced by Opie and Anthony. So on Christmas Eve 2009, Rogan and Redban went live with what would be the first episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, with the name being inspired by the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Much of the episode was dead air, with the pair figuring out how to use the equipment. For some reason, the first episodes of the show would feature a weird animated snowflake effect. After only 5 months of the show existing, it would pick up its first sponsor, Fleshlight. This sponsorship would go on until 2012 and be the first of many the show would have.
You know, what if like language and ideas and all these different things that people come up with, like creativity, and people, when people are creative about things, they pull these things down out of the air. I mean, what are you doing? You're freaking me out.
Why is this bothering you?
Because I can see it.
How are you seeing that?
Dude, are we going to do this podcast, or are you going to play on the fucking
Hey,
thing?
I'm trying to do some tech support here to see if our Ustream shows could be seen.
Yeah, we don't need
there.
to see it. We can watch it on here, man.
Okay. I don't understand.
We gotta have
how
a
is
real
this bothering you if I'm
conversation
holding?
because you were not having a conversation.
We're not having a conversation. You're talking about theories, and I'm listening.
Talk back, then, motherfucker.
I'm not going to interrupt your theories. I don't understand why
you're sitting there and I'm seeing this flash of your fucking iPad.
How are you seeing that?
I am, Brian. Why are you arguing with me? I am, and we're you know, what am I lying?
No, I mean,
no, you're defending yourself when I'm telling you it's distracting.
All right, I'm sorry for listening to you while trying to do some
and doing it more than once when I asked you. It's not tech support,
yes,
dude.
It is.
I'm not at Brian. Stop arguing with me. I'm not asking you to do this.
All right.
Okay. Jesus.
That seemed very unnecessary, Joe.
It's not unnecessary, Brian. You're distracting me. You distract me by web surfing in front of me, and I'm looking at your screen.
Was I web surfing?
Whatever you're doing, I'm seeing you fucking flipping through pages, and you're not listening to what I'm saying.
Okay.
We're not having a conversation.
We weren't having a conversation. You're talking about a theory about something.
Brian,
I'm listening
Brian, you see
while
this
doing
thing we're doing right here? This is 724 people listening.
I understand,
This is what's
Joe.
called a podcast.
Joe, you were doing a theory. I was listening to you, but I was
watching you flip through this fucking thing. You're not listening to me.
Because I'm trying to do something for the show,
Okay,
Joe.
Brian, don't do it. I told you not to do it earlier.
All right.
This weird just had a little girl spat. And we're doing a podcast.
All right. We're not having a conversation, though.
Brian,
we're
Jesus
talking.
Christ, why are you defending this?
Because you're attacking
It's really
me.
simple. I'm not attacking you.
Yes, you
I
are
told you
attacking
twice to stop looking at that fucking thing, that it's distracting me.
In May 2011, SiriusXM made a deal with Joe that would release the show on a subscription-based satellite radio service. In 2013, the show started being uploaded to YouTube from the powerful JRE account and started accruing hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of views. Later that year, Redban started to reduce his workload as Rogan increased the amount of podcasts each week. Redban said it got to the point where Rogan wanted to keep on going 6-7 hours. This became a bit too much for Redban as the only producer, and so Jamie Vernon was hired to help out.
So now would probably be a good time to start eating ass.
Or sushi.
Jamie would take over full-time soon after, and Redban became involved with the show only as a frequent guest. Everything was plain sailing for the Joe Rogan Experience, with the show raking in around $30 million in 2019 according to Forbes. In May 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, Joe Rogan announced that from September the show would move exclusively to Spotify, in a ginormous licensing deal worth up to $200 million. This would initially annoy many listeners who got used to listening to the show on YouTube or other platforms. But of course, people can understand accepting that kind of lucrative deal even if viewers have to use Spotify to get the show. A small inconvenience for the fans, $200 million. A small inconvenience for the fans, but it's $200 million. I think we can empathize with Joe on that one. However, once the show moved to Spotify, users started noticing that some episodes were missing, and this is where the controversy started. People noticed that not only were some episodes completely missing from Spotify, but these episodes featured more controversial than average guests, such as Alex Jones, Milo Yiannopoulos, Gavin McInnes, Chris D'Elia, Tommy Chong, Joey Diaz, and Michaela Peterson. Vice would go on to report that the CEO of Spotify, Daniel Ek, defended keeping episode 1509 on the platform after his employees complained that the episode featured transphobic rhetoric.
Hello, Abigail. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Irreversible damage, the transgender craze seducing our daughters. That's a hot button subject, right? This is a minefield.
It shouldn't be, though.
No?
It really shouldn't be.
Rogan clarified that Spotify said nothing to him along the lines of censoring the podcast or cutting out parts of it. During my research for this video, I discovered jremissing.com. This clever website was made by a software developer and cross-references the episodes on Spotify with the database of all JRE episodes ever released. As of this recording, a whopping 116 episodes are completely missing from Spotify, and 4 episodes have actually been shortened. If Joe's being honest with us, Spotify haven't mentioned censoring his episodes, but that doesn't change the fact that they have censored his episodes. Joe is clearly aware of the situation since he's commented on it and has been aware for the past 4 years. Surely a quick phone call would resolve the matter or give Joe an understanding of the situation. When we look at the list of guests whose episodes were censored, we quickly understand that these episodes likely contained controversial topics, or just had a guest that Spotify deemed problematic. I find it hard to believe that Joe had no idea this was coming. As someone who frequently speaks out against wokeism and censorship, it's extremely hypocritical of Joe to accept the bag from a massive left-wing Swedish corporation who immediately nuke the episodes they don't like as soon as they get them on the platform. Joe seems to be very passionate about free speech, but when it comes to his show, he's more than happy to accept a buyout which explicitly deletes his own episodes. More than 5% of his episodes have either been nuked or shortened by Spotify.
The pursuit is such a strange pursuit because, oftentimes when you're pursuing wealth at all costs. I mean, that is the ultimate goal is the score that you put on the board.
In 2022, the singer India Ari shared a compilation of Joe using the N-word on the Joe Rogan Experience. Spotify had originally refused to carry 42 episodes when it acquired exclusive rights, and then spoke to Rogan about his history of using some racially insensitive language. And it says in an internal memo that Rogan had selected 70 episodes which were removed shortly after in February.
Hello, friends. I'm making this video to talk about the most regretful and shameful thing that I've ever had to talk about publicly. There's a video that's out that's a compilation of me saying the N-word. It's a video that's made of clips taken out of context of me of 12 years of conversations on my podcast, and it's all smushed together, and it looks fucking horrible, even to me. Now, I know that to most people, there's no context where a white person is ever allowed to say that word, never mind publicly on a podcast. And I agree with that now. I haven't said it in years, but for a long time, when I would bring that word up, like if it would come up in conversation, instead of saying the N-word, I would just say the word. I thought as long as it was in context, people would understand what I was doing. Like that context was part of the clip we were talking about Red Fox, how Red Fox said that word on television in the 1970s and how times have changed so much since then. Or about how Richard Pryor used it as one of the titles of one of his albums. Or I was quoting a Lenny Bruce bit, or I was quoting a Paul Mooney bit, or I was talking about how Quentin Tarantino used it repeatedly in Pulp Fiction. Or I was talking about how a Netflix executive, ironically, used it because he was trying to compare it to another offensive word, and he said it out loud, and they fired him. Not calling anybody or just saying the word out loud. I was also talking about how there's not another word like it in the entire English language because it's a word where only one group of people is allowed to use it, and they can use it in so many different ways. Like if a white person says that word, it's racist and toxic, but a black person can use it, and it could be a punchline, it could be a term of endearment, it could be lyrics to a rap song, it could be a positive affirmation. It's a very unusual word, but it's not my word to use. I'm well aware of that now, but for years I used it in that manner. I never used it to be racist because I'm not racist. But whenever you're in a situation where you have to say, I'm not racist, you fucked up. And I clearly have fucked up. And that's my intention to express myself in this video, to say, there's nothing I can do to take that back. I wish I could. Obviously, that's not possible. I do hope that, if anything, that this can be a teachable moment. Because I never thought it would ever be taken out of context and put in a video like that. And now that it is, holy shit, it looks bad. And it's part of also me doing this podcast for thousands of hours, thousands of episodes over 12 years. I said a lot of fucking stupid shit, which is fine when you're talking about most things, but not when you're talking about race. And there's another clip that I have to address. There's a clip from 11 years ago. I was telling a story on the podcast about how me and my friend Tommy and his girlfriend, we got really high. We were in Philadelphia and we went to go see Planet of the Apes. And we didn't know where we were going. We just got dropped off by a cab and we got dropped off in this all black neighborhood. And I was trying to make the story entertaining. And I said, we got out and it was like we were in Africa. It's like we were in Planet of the Apes. I did not, nor would I ever say that black people are apes, but it sure fucking sounded like that. And I immediately afterwards said, that's a racist thing to say. Planet of the Apes wasn't even in Africa. I was just saying there's a lot of black people there. But then I went on to talk about what a positive experience it was and how much fun it was to go to see this movie in a black neighborhood. It wasn't a racist story, but it sounded terrible. And like I said, you can have clunky stories about anything, but not about race. And so I deleted that whole podcast, but obviously somebody made a clip out of it and taken out of context. It looks terrible, but it looks terrible even in context. It's a fucking idiotic thing to say. And I was just trying to be entertaining. I certainly wasn't trying to be racist. And I certainly would never want to offend someone for entertainment with something as stupid as racism. My hope is that, look, I can't go back in time and change what I've said. I wish I could. Obviously, that's not possible. But I do hope that this can be a teachable moment for anybody that doesn't realize how offensive that word can be coming out of a white person's mouth, in context or out of context. My sincere and humble apologies. I wish there was more that I could say, but all of this is just me talking from the bottom of my heart. It makes me sick watching that video, but hopefully at least some of you will accept this and understand where I'm coming from. My apologies and much love. My sincere, deepest apologies and much love.
For someone who loves to act tough against the mob, I find it astounding how Joe can be manipulated by a corporation in this way. Before he ever knew what Spotify was, he was probably worth tens of millions of dollars from his podcasts, shows, UFC, you name it. As of February 2024, Joe signed on to a new $250 million contract, but announced that the show would no longer be exclusive to Spotify, and so new episodes would be uploaded to YouTube once again. Are we actually seeing the guests that Joe Rogan wants? Or are we seeing a version of the show which aligns with Spotify's views? Spotify are effectively cherry-picking the shows or guests that they don't like and removing them. And Joe seems to have learnt his lesson from the big boss, because only 2 episodes have been removed after the February 2022 fiasco, one featuring Chris D'Elia and one featuring Gad Saad. Joe has been a good boy for his corporate masters for around 700 episodes now. Would you believe me if I told you they deleted episode number 198 with guest Brody Stevens? Brody was a longtime comedian friend of Joe's who suffered from bipolar and depression and tragically took his own life in 2019, a year before the Spotify deal. The weird part is that this episode was removed on February 4th, 2022, allegedly part of those 70 episodes which Joe Rogan selected for deletion.
He got off his meds.
Yeah.
He didn't like the way it felt to be on them, and it was he's so hard. That's such a hard one to take because everyone loved that guy, and to think that everyone, I mean, he has no haters. I don't know a single person was like that guy was a dick.
No
one. Everyone loved him.
His Swedish overlords put him into a corner, and instead of sticking up for himself, he willingly sacrificed episodes, even if it meant throwing his late friend under the bus. This is not the tough guy Joe Rogan that we are used to seeing. The thing about the pre-Spotify Joe Rogan experience was that it felt like it was just free. Joe could have absolutely anyone on the show, and whether you liked them or didn't like them, it just existed. If Joe didn't like it, he wouldn't have them on again. It was his choice. Joe could say quite literally anything he wanted, and so could his guests. The Joe Rogan experience of today isn't like that. Joe has to bow to what Spotify like and what they don't like. They can probably veto any guest that Joe wants to have on. Joe's guests also seem to be within a more confined boundary of politics. In the past, he used to have radical thinkers on the show, whether they were far left, far right, full-blown communists or anarchists, or just said controversial things for a laugh. Despite all of this, there are still many things to admire Rogan for. His incredible success in multiple industries is inspiring to millions. Hopefully this video gave you clarity on the situation. Drop a like and please subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching.